had an opportunity to purchase the books, look at the book before the mad throngs of people came in and started ripping them off of the table. So we had an opportunity to get the books and to look at them and to meet our featured authors. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Especially without the mask.
I know. Yes. But we do request that you kind of social distance and keep your distance because the pandemic is still with us. It's not quite over, but hey, it's up to you. It's all up to you. So I am glad you're here. On behalf of Dorothy Levy and Nancy Carrica, the other two authors that are featured in Crone Chronicles, our feature book today. And Karen, did you want to introduce me? We haven't rehearsed this.
It seemed like you were introducing yourself, so I thought you were doing a fabulous job.
Thank you.
A fabulous job. I'm going to leave my mask on because, well, I don't want to spit into the microphone because you all are going to be using it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, welcome everyone. This is the book signing event for the Crone Chronicles. And Deborah has been planning on this for months and months. And we're sad that she's not here. The Friends of the Library bookstore sponsors this. And actually the bookstore today has a half price sale. So, let's see. Well, they close at 4. You might be able to get over there. Anyway, we appreciate the bookstore and the Friends of the Library. So I want to introduce Beverly Lerner, and she's going to give the initial talk about Deborah, right?
And other things.
And other things. We're really together, especially me. Beverly.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Friends of the Library, for sponsoring this book signing event of local authors. This is the second book signing event that the library has sponsored for local authors, and they have many, many more planned. Crone Chronicles, Deborah Gish, Nancy, Dorothy, and I are all pleased to be a part of it today. I have prepared remarks. On behalf of Deborah Gish, who is the heart and soul of Crone Chronicles, I do welcome you all today. Deborah, unfortunately, is unable to be here. So I'm facilitating our event in place of her. However, she did give me a carefully scripted introduction, and I promised her I would not vary from it too much. Unfortunately, Deborah, who is the heart and soul and has been planning this for the last 2 years, was diagnosed with COVID just a few days ago, and she's in quarantine until Tuesday, so she can't be here. Now I will read what she has written for me. Deborah was sadly just been diagnosed with COVID-19 as in isolation until Tuesday. She sends her apologies and deep gratitude to all in attendance today. She has asked me to facilitate this session, and now featuring 3 local authors contributing to this collection of short stories by 57 female elders, followed by a question and answer with the audience. As scripted by Deborah, I will continue to read. Deborah Gish founded and directs Crone Chronicles, authored a memoir, Displaced, a perilous true story of an expatriate working to right wrongs from the past. She published poetry in Best American Poets 2015 to 2019, and is the author, managing editor of Crone Chronicles 2020, intimately inspiring glimpses into the lives of wise women 52 and older. A Washington, D.C. native, Deborah Gish is a pioneering international development practitioner, a UN peace mediator, and an author engaged in multiple fields: women's, girls, elder, and indigenous rights, transformative justice, disaster relief, gender-based violence, child labor, and human trafficking. Deborah is a very busy woman. She serves on the Sisters of Charity New York's SCNY Task Force for Immigration Reform. Gish, having dedicated her life to promoting women's worth, to combat the glaring ignorance about women's roles worldwide, and a bona fide crone herself, helps to empower female elders. It's an honor to be with you today. Although Crone Chronicles 2020 was released in October 2020, thanks to the pandemic, we've had little opportunity to share the special collection of short stories, poems, and songs by 57 female elders from various ethnic, racial, and cultural backgrounds. Today, we'll hear stories by 3 representative local authors, Dorothy LeMay, wave hi, Lemmy, Dorothy Lemmy, Nancy Carricker, rave, wave, and Eve Beverly Lerner. Before we read, I'd like to share Deborah's motivation for creating this collection. It was brewing for a long time. Deborah is dedicated to empowering all women. But now that she's getting older, she's more focused on crones, especially those who often become invisible after raising families, retiring, and or finding themselves alone without a life partner or companionship due to divorce, death, sexuality, poverty, abandonment, and illness. Deborah is also tired of crones being labeled as worthless, ugly, old hags, witches who eat babies. We are no such thing. We are vital and changing the world. She created this publication as a culmination of and a partial solution to confronting violence and systematic oppression of women and girls throughout her career. Deborah knows, as we all know from our own experiences, that storytelling heals wounds. She believes by telling our stories, we will improve our image and stature as crones, reshaping our image back to the ancient archetype of a wise woman and female elders, which we have all learned. Finally, a special shout out to Deborah's editorial review board who helped her select, edit, and in some cases rewrite stories. They are Marianne Hopper, Diana Rivers, Susan Rue, and Sklena Schindler. Thanks to book illustrator Jenna Weston, cover design Elizabeth Land, and cover artist Robin Toller, all who helped birth this beautiful baby. Deborah is eternally grateful to each of you. The book, a little side note, this is not scripted. The book has a wonderful introduction and preface that Deborah did write, and she explains the background and the process of creating this baby that she fully gave birth to and unfortunately is not here to share with all of you. It's a beautifully written book. It's compiled from people who live in many different countries all over the globe. It's poems and songs and stories, and I know you'll enjoy it. Today, we're going to hear from 3 of us who were asked to contribute to it and proudly did contribute to it. Our first contributor is Dorothy Lemmy. Dorothy wrote a tender story of caring for her only child. Deborah is a PhD and retired nursing professor of obstetrics. Got that right. She taught at Kent State and Lakeland Community College, Ohio. She lives with her life partner of 25 years, Ken, who is videotaping this for us. She also attends UU in Lakeland, enjoys hiking, dinner with friends, and vegan cooking. At 70, Dorothy now uses writing to heal damaged parts of her own psyche. Please help me welcome Dorothy Lemmy.
Well, welcome. I haven't ever done this before, so I will try not to stumble. I practiced though this morning. The knot. Even though you tie 100 knots, the string remains one. I awakened that Saturday morning after a restless sleep in a stiff, plastic, narrow chair converted to a bed. I was slowly aware of being in this harsh, unfamiliar room, and the first thought in my semi-conscious mind was how I could get some morphine so I could overdose my daughter. Dawn's residential care facility had called me at home to tell me that she was admitted to the hospital with a broken right femur. How did that happen, I asked. We're not sure. The daycare provider said her leg seemed loose when they got her off the bus today. I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. I decided to stay home, get a good night's sleep, and go to the hospital after school the next day. My daughter was 31 and had been hospitalized for urgent care up to 3 times a year since her birth. I knew the broken leg required hospital care. She should be in good hands until I could get there the next day. I walked into the brightly lit hospital room. Sounds of oxygen swished through the nasal cannula stuck in her nostrils. Dawn has always hated that tube and would usually swipe it away with her small finger. She was not fighting it now, not moving at all. When she finally got a glimpse of me, I did not get the smile of recognition I always long for when I walk up to her. My daughter stretched her stiff arms aimlessly toward an unknown object. Her chapped lips pursed, eyes half closed. An IV line was strapped to her right hand and an ace bandage wrapped around her broken leg. She was hooked up to a heart monitor and a catheter to her bladder. Worst of all, she had all the signs of airway obstruction, including flared nostrils and labored breathing. Every time she had been admitted to the hospital, she had developed pneumonia. Dawn received better care at her residential treatment facility than when she was admitted to a hospital. As a nurse and as a nursing instructor, I knew nurses can be overwhelmed with too many patients, and especially non-communicative patients. I had asked the staff to treat her there at home when pneumonia compromised her. The first time I felt that nagging knot of fear in my stomach was when Dawn was 5 months old. During her warm bath in the kitchen sink, I demonstrated how she could splash the water. I then lifted her arm and watched it drop to the surface with no input from her. I knew this was not normal. She was admitted to the hospital for a workup at the age of 1 in 1972, and the results were normal. At 2, she was tested for her developmental level and was diagnosed with profound retardation, unknown cause. It was recommended that I consider admitting her to a residential housing when she was 6 years old, not gripping again. When she was 8 and a half, I did admit her to a residential care facility, knowing as a single parent I could not support her on a bank teller's salary. Now seeing Dawn in her hospital bed, I asked the nurse, when did she get her last pain medication? She got Tylenol at 12 noon through her tube, she replied. Since Dawn cannot speak, you have to be able to interpret her face. Even I had trouble doing that accurately. However, she had a broken femur, and I was sure she was in pain. She had her thigh bone broken yesterday, and she has only had Tylenol? Dismayed, the nurse stuck her hands in her pockets. She was not crying or indicating she was in pain. Anyway, her respiratory status is compromised. My conscience nagged at me. Dawn lay here all night in pain while I slept. What is wrong with me? Dawn would do better with a stronger mother. What I actually said to the nurse was, I will be with her now, so please give her whatever narcotic medication was ordered for her. 8 years earlier, Dawn had her other femur broken by one of the aides who was trying to change her soiled diaper. For almost 6 months, she was in a body cast which fit from the chest to her toes. It was a long, painful recovery with infections and a heel bed sore. I imagined Dawn suffering and strapped to a horrible cast for the next 6 months. The nurse returned with morphine. Within 30 minutes, Dawn's breathing seemed to slow a little, her stiff body relaxed slightly, and her eyes closed. She seemed to be more comfortable, so I left late that evening. The next day I returned to find Dawn's face flushed, warm to the touch, and her eyes glassy. Her rebreather mask was too big for her face. I touched her hot wrist and found a gauze pressure dressing. I pushed the call button for a nurse. Minutes later, a slim, black-haired nurse arrived. Did Dawn have a blood gas test today? I asked her. She said yes. Why? Her x-rays already indicated she has pneumonia. The nurse's smile was condescending, a smile that said, "Dear, I know you are also a nurse, but let me enlighten you." Instead, she said, "We need to see what effect the mask would have, so we need to repeat it." "No, that will not do," I told her, and asked to see the house officer. Several hours later, the house officer walked into the room. He was a young man, probably mid-20s. I told him I did not want blood gases taken. I knew it was painful, and Dawn was a DNR. I do not resuscitate anyway. "Did you say DNR?" he asked. I did not know that. "Okay, no more blood gases, but we will send her for a CAT scan for an embolism." I asked when they would set her leg so she could go home. The doctor said, "We're unsure what course of action we can take. Our specialist is out of town and will return on Thursday." This upset me. She's supposed to lie here suffering, waiting on a specialist? What kind of hospital is this? Dawn develops pneumonia every time she comes to the hospital, I told him. If she stays a long time, she will get sicker. He promised to discuss the situation with the attending physician. I was powerless to get her leg set, so Dawn and I were going to be waiting. The hospital atmosphere was familiar to me as a nurse, but as a mother, this was not a place I wanted her to be.
Oh gosh, it doesn't get any less painful, does it? What a heart-wrenching story. That's not the whole story. There's more to it, but you'll have to read it in the book
You'll have to buy
yourself.
it.
I think they've all bought it. I think we, but thank you. Thank you, Dorothy, and it doesn't get any easier, I can tell. Our next contributor is Nancy Carrigan, and she's going to be reading to you Daisy, Daisy, which is a deeply personal story of finding herself while losing her mother to Alzheimer's. Nancy is a native Floridian, and she spends her time watercolor painting and writing short stories since retiring from teaching elementary school. Right here in Polk County. Right here in Polk County. Humor plays a big part of her stories. Some of her published works are included in anthologies, Reflections and Crone Chronicles 2020. Her collection of Southern fiction, Once Upon a Camel, is available on Amazon. Nancy Carrigan, reading Daisy, Daisy.
You know, I didn't know until recently that I've been on Crone for 25 years.
And if you know that, you know, has this changed your opinion of yourself?
Oh, yes. A fellow Cronin on this. And I haven't stood in front of a lot of people in a long time. I retired in 2003 from teaching, and,
Use the mic.
is it on?
Yeah.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I've been told all my life I talk too loud, so this is new. Okay, this is a story about my mother, whose real name is Woodrow, but in the stories I always call her Daisy, just in case I have a relative that might find offense at something I write, so I did that as a cover. Each Monday and Thursday, I dreaded visiting my 92-year-old mother in the assisted living home where she had lived for the past 4 years. Most of the time she didn't know me, but she knew I was part of her family. Usually, she thought I was one of her 7 deceased sisters. She would give me her wonderful dimpled smile and hold my hand tightly as she chattered. Other times, she wouldn't look at me or respond. Alzheimer's was quickly erasing her memory. I wondered how much she comprehended when I tried to communicate with her. So I began to write down some of the memories she shared. That was when I began to understand her difficult childhood and to appreciate her strength of character and her love of family. I learned the art of patience by listening to her shattered life experiences. Mother passed away at 96. She had no quality of life at the end. She was immobile, unable to communicate, and finally suffered even when she was comatose. I had thought that it would be a relief to see her at peace, but it wasn't. There was only the hollow feeling of loss. I treasure those last years of getting to know Daisy as I lost my mother and found myself. I'd like to, my story is divided up by the year, and I tried to use all the things I had written down that she had told me, her recent memory that she still had, and then her childhood and things that happened to her long-term memory. And so, let me find my page. Okay. And so that's how it's divided, so I'll have to just tell you whether it's long-term or short-term. This is long-term. 1930, Brother carried Papa into the kitchen. Blood had soaked through their clothes so that Daisy thought they were both injured. He tripped over a log, Mama. Both barrels went off. Papa moaned, "Doctor." Yep, the doc. Mama yanked the oilcloth off the table, sending dishes crashing to the floor. The horrified children backed against the walls, leaving Papa stretched out on the table. Brother ran to fetch the doctor. Mama cut away Papa's shredded clothes. She wiped away some of the blood with her apron and found gunshot wounds in his shattered thigh, hip, and rib cage. A jagged, broken bone stuck through his skin. She tied the apron tightly around his leg. His face was ashen. She bent to see if he was still breathing. Relieved, she turned to her frightened children. "Go down to the bay head and pick some blackberries so I can make some pies for supper. Then y'all can play. Don't come back till someone comes to get you." Her face was fierce. "Papa's going to be fine. Take those 3 baskets on the porch. Go on," she ordered in a strange monotone voice. After the children filed out, she turned back to him. "Please, God, don't take him away from her," she prayed, and then she wept. Papa's leg got gangrene. Daisy could hear him screaming all the way to the bay head when the doctor sawed it off. Brother wouldn't tell them where he buried it. During the weeks that followed, Papa was in and out of consciousness, cursing and hollering and laughing wildly. He thrashed around, causing his wounds to bleed more, so they tied a torn sheet over his chest and around the bed frame to hold him down. They took turns fanning him and squeezing wet cloths on his parched lips. Mama never left his side. I'm going to skip over to the funeral. Papa's funeral was delayed until his relatives from Georgia arrived. Mama stayed locked in her room until her children were sleeping in bed. Then, when she was sure they were asleep, she crept from room to room, searching for Papa's leg. She was 34 years old with 9 children. She wished that she had died with him. After a week, Mama came out and fixed breakfast. Her beautiful blue-black hair had turned white. It was so short Daisy could see the red patches of skin and scabs where hair had been pulled out by the roots. Mama went about doing chores without noticing her children or speaking to them. Never again would she dance across the kitchen floor, humming or singing. Daisy and her sisters were frightened by this shuffling shadow of a woman who was not their happy mama. They huddled together. That is the song. I'm sorry, it's depressing. After I read it this morning, I thought, gosh, yours is sad, mine's sad, but yours isn't.
Mine is, thank you. Thank you,
And there is a
Nancy.
picture of my mother at the end of the story of the book.
Yeah, that's, wow. Okay, I'll read my bio as it was written by Deborah. Most of you know me, so I'm not gonna tell you anything you don't already know about me, but for those of you who don't, I grew up in New York City. I taught English to speakers of other languages in Miami-Dade County, and I moved to Winter Haven, Florida in 2003 with my sweetheart Earl. My proudest moments were writing three books, getting them published, and learning to fly an airplane. The story I'm going to read to you today is about my learning to fly an airplane. It's called A Pilot at Last. I didn't just wake up one morning and say, I think I'll learn to fly. I was 60 years old and 4 foot 10 inches tall. Too old, too short. That's what I thought. My sweetheart Earl thought differently. I'll have a special cushion made to fit the airplane so you can reach the rudders, he said. There are lots of people flying who are much older than you, he added. That's true, I said, but those people love to fly. It's been their lifelong passion. I'm happy walking, driving, or being your passenger in the plane. Hi, Chuck. Then he said the words that changed my perspective, made me a hero to my children, and resulted in one of the most significant accomplishments of my life. What if something were to happen to me while I'm flying the plane? If you can't land it, we'll both be dead. I knew he was right. There is no roadside assistance in the sky. You can't pull over to a cloud and call AAA. So with survival as my primary motivation, I began flying lessons. My first instructor believed that flying an airplane was instinctive. Think of a witch on a broomstick, he said as he demonstrated S-turns at 1,500 feet above the ground. Imagine the plane as an extension of yourself and just do what feels right. Stupid man. It's your airplane, he said. I grasped the yoke tightly with both hands. The plane turned to the right, then to the left, then up, then down. We climbed to 2,000 feet. Use the rudders, he said. Maintain altitude. Panic set in. I had no idea how to maintain altitude or where the rudders were. The first lesson reinforced my belief that I wasn't meant to be a pilot or a witch. The next 9 lessons weren't much better. After several bumpy landings that took us from one side of the runway to another, my instructor and I agreed that he wasn't enough of a wizard to transform me into an accomplished aviator. It took me more than 2 years to get over that fearful, frustrating experience and start taking lessons again. Opportunity came when Earl and I moved to an airport community in Central Florida. Surrounded by supportive pilot neighbors, private planes, and a flight school, we decided I would take lessons in Earl's basic, easy-to-fly plane. I had learned what the rudders did, but I was still too short to reach them. We solved that problem by having a creative shoemaker put extensions on the soles of my shoes, which resulted in extending my leg length by 8 inches. With the help of 2 cushions below me and 1 behind me, I was able to see out the front windows. The flight school assigned an instructor to me. I sensed a problem immediately. He was younger than my youngest child, a baby pilot. Clearly too young to know anything about life and survival in an airplane. "Let's go flying," he said. Once we were up in the air, my anxiety increased. I soon realized my young instructor didn't know the effects aging can have on the body or the mind. As my fingers became numb from gripping the yoke, I tried desperately to focus my mind on what he was saying. "Keep your wings level. Where's the horizon? Watch out for other airplanes. Do you know where the airport is? You're gaining altitude. Watch your speed. Change your radio frequency. Stop!" I yelled into the headset. "Too much information. I can't think that fast." I looked down and said, "We seem to be getting close to the ground very quickly." Baby pilot grabbed controls and skillfully landed the plane. The flight school set me up with a different instructor the next day. I was making good progress with my more senior instructor and was beginning to enjoy flying our small plane. It had 2 seats, basic instruments, and a cruising speed of 80 miles an hour. "Look at those cars down there," I said to Earl as we were flying leisurely around one day. "They're moving faster than we are." So Earl sold the plane and got a bigger, faster one. We named the new plane Max because its purchase maxed out Earl's savings. I was so intimidated by the size of Max and the complexity of the avionics in the cockpit that a year passed before I had the courage to resume my lessons. During the next year, the instructors came and went with the same frequency as my commitment to fly. I still didn't yearn to fly, so my lessons weren't a priority. I welcomed any excuse to stay on the ground. I was grateful for morning fog, unavailability of instructors, high winds, or problems with the airplane. Several instructors stayed with me for a few lessons and then went on to more committed students. I couldn't blame them. Then Gail joined the flight school. Welcome, new people. Welcome. We're glad you're here for Crone Chronicles 2020. We have 3 authors, 2 including myself. Dorothy and Nancy have already read their stories, or the beginning of their story. The idea is to kind of leave you hanging so you will want to read more and find out how it ends. We would like now to answer any questions you may have. Or comments. Anybody want to ask questions? We have until 3 o'clock, we have 4 o'clock, we have another 20 minutes to answer your questions, to sign your books. Do you want to purchase them? Yes, Jen. Kate.
Both the stories, all 3 stories are really, really beautiful. What I really enjoy is that they're nonfiction, and, you know, they're real, and that's how you folks came across it. It's a good look into your lives. It's amazing. The writing is really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
and the setup of the book. I don't think I've ever seen a book like that. It's wonderful. It's really beautiful.
I know you're going to enjoy reading it and reading all the stories.
Yes.
The only thing in common is that all of the authors are Crones. We're over 52 years of age, and in the introduction and the preface to the book, Deborah Gish, who unfortunately wasn't here with us today, explains why they're Crones and how she's trying to change the meaning of Crones. So these women, and it's all women, I guess that by definition, Crones are women, right, are all over, and they're all sharing their personal poems, stories, and artwork with us in a very beautiful and personal way. Thank you for that question, Kate. Any other question or comments? Lorraine?
So my dad tried to teach me to fly when I was 4, so I remember how far down the pedal. What kind of airplane was the first one that you did?
It was an Aranca Champ, which is a tail dragger. It was a 1926 plane. It was an antique, fully restored, beautiful, and Earl had modern equipment put into it, but it was side by side, and the reason I needed the cushions and the pedals, the seats didn't move. So they didn't slide up, so we had to bolster me up and back and that kind of thing. And the one that spoiler, I did get my license. The one I got my licenses was a Cessna 172, which
And
is
did
bigger
that,
and
did that
faster.
seat move?
In the Cessna? Oh yeah, that has everything. Very intimidating.
The Cadillac of airplanes.
Yeah, yeah. And also, it had, well, planes are a whole experience in themselves. Those of you who don't know, you don't steer them like a car. You know, you use the rudder pedals to make them go backwards in direction you're moving every part of your body, which for somebody who's directionally challenged is very difficult. Any other questions? Yes?
I don't know if it's a question, but maybe you'll have an answer. Just when you were, reading your stories, and I haven't heard your story, so I don't know it. But it seems like it's very painful, and that it's currently painful still, right? And so then I'm thinking, why did she want to write this down? You know what I mean? Like, what was it? Cathartic? Was it healing? Is it? How does that feel to write down something that's so difficult?
I find writing is healing when you have this damaged psyche. And when my daughter was 1, I wanted to find a book that was by a mother who had a child like mine, and I went to the library and there were none, and I thought, this is crazy, I'm gonna write it. So I kept notes and, kept a little journal and kept her notes from the place where she lived, and she died about 19 years ago, which is what this chapter is about. But I find it very helpful. Otherwise, it gets stuck in your gut and you can't get it out and be who you really are. Good question.
Very good question.
Beverly, are you still flying frequently?
No. That's another story in another book. I never really enjoyed it, even though I got my license. I never enjoyed it, and I had a couple of very scary events, and I said, it's not worth the responsibility.
Only if Earl dies in the plane will you use that
Yeah.
skill.
I still hope I know how to land the plane. But that's a good question. Right now the plane is in for repair, and when it comes out it will be up for sale. So if anyone is interested in a fully equipped, beautiful Cessna 172, I'll give you my number. Thank you, Dorothy. And also, I love that you emphasize the fact that you've been writing it down. We belong to a writers group. Many of the people here belong to writers groups right here at the library. Jean, do you want to say something about the writers group? Jean facilitates the writers group. And Karen facilitates the writers group.
We welcome everybody, and writing is wonderful.
Yes, very healing.
For those of you who are interested in making a lasting legacy, writing will accomplish that. To leave a lasting legacy for future generations to tell your story. So that's something to consider. I'm sure we can start a writers group at the temple if anybody is interested. You're interested in a writers group, so we could do that. Temple Beth Shalom is nicely represented here. So I thank you all for coming in. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
I know Deborah's not here, but I was wondering, think we could read some of hers too?
She has stories in the book.
I mean, out loud. I love it when people read to me. I don't have my glasses right now, but I would like to hear some. Is that right to ask?
What do you think of that, Dorothy?
I think it's a good idea.
Do you want to pick a
I
story?
would
It's her
love to.
chapter.
If you look in the back of the book,
The
there's
back?
an index of the
Page
authors.
87 starts it.
87?
Yeah, it starts, and there's only a few pages, and I wish she was here, because she's in front of me.
Do you want to read it, Kay?
No.
She wants to be read too, exactly.
Somebody want to read it?
I'll read the book.
Thank you, thank you. It's really
She
cool.
calls this, Once Upon a Crone. I wanted to help improve the image of crones by asking fellow writers to showcase strength, courage, wisdom, trials, and tribulations. I gave her a lot of trial. I asked them to write a short story about an incident, experience, or revelation in their lives that helped shape, define, or contribute to who they are today. Many writers had a tough time with these prompts. When I began to ponder my own questions, I came up with a blank. I felt there has been no single incident or event in my life that shaped or crystallized my identity as me. Not then, not now. I feared I wouldn't be able to contribute to my own collection of stories since I didn't have anything explicit to write about that truly defines who or what I am at 65. Then it hit me. Past life regressions. I've learned that past lives are a major source of information. We return or reincarnate over and over to start, continue, and or complete something we couldn't in a former life. Some people undergo past life regressions as a form of physical or psychic therapy through hypnosis. Others, like me, do them to gain deeper understanding of who we are and why we do the things we do in this life. For example, I learned that my current life is directly related to my most immediate past life in Poland during the Holocaust in the early 1940s. At the age of 9, I was thrown into the fire pits along with my beautiful mother. My young life was snuffed out so tragically that it evidently motivated me to dedicate a big portion of this life to searching for those who died or disappeared during bloody wars, internal civil conflicts, and cultural revolutions. Virginia Woolf, author of A Room of One's Own, said, "Moments of profound insight that come from writing about our soulful, thoughtful examination of our psychic wounds should be called shocks, for they force us into an awareness about ourselves and our relationship to others and our place in the world that we wouldn't otherwise have had. They realign the essential nature of our being." Over the past 20 plus years, the shocks from that most recent past life that motivate me to work searching for and identifying victims of wars and to condemn the perpetrators while seeking justice and reparations for surviving family members. I lived and worked outside the USA, away from family and friends, facilitating and verifying post-war peace processes in countries including El Salvador, Guatemala, Serbia, Montenegro, Peru, and recently Papua New Guinea. After a tough intervention, I asked people who serve as spiritual guides to cleanse my aura. Several have read my energy and asked if I had been in a fire. No, I tell them. Yet they see that my lungs are charred. Yes, my respiratory system is my Achilles heel, and they can see psychic evidence that I was burned alive in a past life. Why would I do this work now if it weren't a calling for me to help right wrongs from the past by searching for the truth, instilling social justice and reconciliation in this life? I am transforming my own traumatic past life death. This work not only heals me, but heals others in the process.
That was a good suggestion, thank you. Any other
It's
comments,
Papua.
questions?
Papua New Guinea, you said Padua.
Did I say it wrong?
Yeah, it's P-A-P-U-A, New Guinea,
Papua.
or Patua. Could be a typo error.
No, I don't think so. I think it was a pronunciation error.
Yeah,
Oh.
that was me.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Well, Karen, do you want to make any closing comments?
No, thank you.
It's a nice short answer.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
I want to thank everybody for important to her. And it's interesting, you were reading about her lungs, and of course, that's what's impacted now, today, is her lungs, because of COVID. So, that was interesting.
Not really.
Yeah, so, anyway, I'm gonna open the door and, well, no, I mean, I wanna open it because we're, you know, we have till 4 and I'm hoping some people that
We'll wander in.
are in the hallway will wander in too, so.
And if you want any books, they're for
Yeah,
sale.
we still have
And
books to sell.
absolutely, that's why we're here.
Right, right. I thank you to those of you who've already purchased the books. I know you will enjoy reading them, reading all of the stories and relating to them. And I encourage you to write your own story,
Yeah.
because you'll never be this young again. Never be this young again, and you all have stories to tell. You've all accomplished a great deal in your lives, and I personally didn't want my stories to die with me. I wish you,
Good way to say it, Beth.
yes, thank you. I wish you a happy day. Hang around, visit, talk. Chuck, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Just sorry I missed the first 2 stories. The pro-choice rally in Lakeland went very well.
Right.
It was a mess.
I was there.
Yeah.
She was there.
Happy day, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.